Hello, BookTube. Well, it's right about now that I would usually get shrill and defensive on the subject of my predictability. It's right about now that I would loudly point out that I am a snub-nosed, A-frame-shouldered, raven-haired, 20-something sexy influencer with 8-pack abs that you could grate cheese on. And that therefore I can't be a predictable old man. That's not possible. It's right around now that I would be saying something like that because it's getting towards the end of a week, and in the forecast there is a large amount of precipitation coming this weekend. And some of you have pointed out, some more kindly than others, that when those forces combine, I tend to go to the Brattle Bookshop to stock up on books. And all that is true. We are approaching the end of the week. I have a rather annoying obligation, a real-world obligation that is nagging at my time tomorrow, Friday. I don't see any way around it. I'm largely, as some of you have pointed out, I've largely edited real-world obligations out of my life. I've largely done that. I strongly advise it. Oh my God, it frees your spirit in such an enormous way. But every once in a while, the real world just wants me, and there's nothing I can do about that. That looks like it's tomorrow, and I don't like to go out and do errands on the weekend because that's when everybody that's at work the rest of the week is out. They're free on the weekend, and they're all nuts. And it looks like Sunday night or Sunday afternoon, a storm system is moving in. The prediction models have been all over the map when it comes to what this storm system is. I swear, from hour to hour, it won't go any lower than heavy rain Sunday into Monday. But often, like every other hour, I will check the models, and they will have changed again and expanded that to heavy rain, sleet, or even snow for 5 days, not just overnight on 2 days. So something looks like it's coming. All of this could fizzle out and be nothing, but something looks like it is. And then when I go out on the weekend, and it's the end of the week, so I went to the Brattle. This is the long and the short here. I went to the Brattle. Now, coin rolling did take place here at Hyde Cottage. It was a long ordeal. It was a lot of fun. And I stuffed a little velvet bag, little drawstring velvet bag with all of those coins, with all the rolled coins. Ended up being a chunk of money. So I brought that to the Brattle Bookshop, which for those of you who are new to this channel is the used bookstore in downtown Boston. They are my bookstore. I love them dearly. and they have 3 stories. The third story, I never go up there, really. That's unless I'm summoned to the office of She Who Must Be Obeyed. But otherwise, no, I never go up there. Because it's the rare and collectible books, which I don't care about at all. And I wouldn't spend money on them. Not in a million years. I wouldn't spend money on them. But the first 2 floors are just a general purpose used bookstore. Really good general purpose used bookstore. Stock turning over all the time. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of books on every subject in the world except romance. And then next door to the shop, there's a sale lot, an outdoor sale lot open to the elements. So it was pretty nippy first thing this morning. Genuinely chilly. And it's thousands more books, but they're not organized in any way except by price. $1 each, right? $3 each, and $5 each. And I typically spend all my time out in the sale lot. I typically do that. And I brought that velvet bag of coins with me to the shop this morning because I am a problem customer. I'm an annoying problem customer, and I have long since plagued them by saying, "Hey, can I bring in rolled coins?" they always just do the long-suffering, okay. So I did. I brought those in. And I figured, wouldn't it be neat, since it's basically free money, it's all stuff that I found on the ground, wouldn't it be neat to use that for my Brattle purchases for the day? But as soon as I walked in the shop, I was told that another one of you has called in generous store credit. I wasn't even finished with the last generous store credit. And then I got more generous store credit. So when I'm at the Brattle, I never need to watch what I'm spending anyway. If I shopped on the 3rd floor, I would, but I don't. So I never really think about it. At the Brattle, my quitting time, the thing that is going to stop me is when I reach my carrying capacity, not when I reach my spending capacity, because the books are too cheap for you to ever do that. So I it's not like I shop with abandon there anyway, is what I'm saying. I don't, suddenly feel free when I've got credit because I feel free anyway. The books aren't expensive. I do most of my shopping out in the sale lot, which is, you can always find things. But thanks to one of you, thank you very much. You know who you are. Thank you very much for that credit. I was extra footloose and fancy free. Of course, when it all came down to it at the end, when it was finally time for me to finish my tedious anecdotes and finish bothering the staff and actually wrap things up and leave, I decided to just pay with the rolled coins. I had brought them there, and they weighed 10 pounds. So I decided just to pay with them and save the credit, so that I don't have to lug. Why go to the bother of rolling coins, putting them in a velvet bag, stuffing it in my shoulder bag, and then not using them? So I use those. So the credits are still just sitting there. That is just wonderful. If you feel like giving me a book, don't do it. Of course, rule number 1 on this channel is don't send me a book. But you're always welcome to call the store. You're always welcome to call the Brattle Bookshop. Don't call the Brattle Theatre. They're in Cambridge. And they play pretentious French movies, so I have no interest in a gift certificate if you got one there. Call the Brattle Bookshop in downtown Boston and just swear out a store credit for me. Always happy to do that. You probably won't need to identify me beyond my first name. You'll probably just need to call them up and say, I'd like to give Steve some store credit. They'll probably know who you mean. You probably won't have to do more than that. And the side benefit is you'll get a book haul out of it. Because I haul everything that I get at the Brattle. Maybe not completely. I think probably I have a visit or two more to the Brattle in 2023, but I don't know if there'll be videos for those visits. I'm not sure. The very end of 2023 will certainly feature at least one Brattle trip that has a haul of books, but doesn't have a video. But for now, I went to the Brattle. By happenstance of rolled coins and also generosity, I could shop with abandon, and I did. And I got a ton of stuff. I got a ton of books, so I want to show them to you. We start with the paperbacks. Let's start with the paperbacks. I found a little paperback with a laminated cover. I don't think I've ever seen this looking quite this way. This is a paperback of Edmund Wilson's book, Upstate. I'm familiar with this. I've had it and read it many times, but always in the little hardcovers that were made of all of Wilson's books. Very distinctive little hardcovers. Oh, sorry, that's supposed to be over here. I got talking to you about that. Not in a little mass market paperback like this. These are just diary entries from Wilson as an old man in upstate New York. So I am a sucker for all of his books. Once upon a time, you could go into a bookstore and get the whole of Edmund Wilson, all in these little, the hardcovers weren't any bigger than this, all in these little, very distinctive hardcovers, collections of his columns, his actual books, his fiction, and this thing. And this is sort of the capstone. He did a series of books, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, and he did a capstone here. And I like the book, but I cannot sell it at all. The only way that you would like this is if you already liked everything that Wilson did. You couldn't otherwise. The earlier volumes have the sharp crackle of social observation. This is just a crapulent, querulous old man. Griping. This is mostly griping. I lost track when I read this thing probably 10 years ago, so I'm due for a reread. I lost track of how many times in this book he complains about his taxes. I lost count of how many times that was. I lost count of how many times he complains about needing to dress up for the neighbors if they invite him to a dinner or something like that. All very sour and bad-tempered. Now, the earlier Edmund Wilson in those earlier volumes, even back to the 1930s, was sour and bad-tempered, but he had the sense and self-control to keep it out of his prose. As old men get older, sometimes they decide they don't need that self-control anymore, and they just sort of whine on the page. Not good at all. Although, this is full of charming moments. Absolutely. Everything that Wilson did is full of charming moments. One that stuck out to me the last time I read it was him mentioning offhandedly that a friend of his has mentioned that President Kennedy is thinking about giving him one of these newfangled, freedom medals? Presidential freedom medals? And Wilson told the friend who passed along that mention, that I'm not sure that President Kennedy's going to want to give me that medal when he learns how badly I hate the way the government is spending money on defense contracts and how much I have to say about Vietnam. And he records later on, just a few pages after that in this book, that it's relayed to him that news was brought to President Kennedy, who snapped at the bringer of the news and said, "This is for literary merit. This isn't an achievement award. This is not an agreement award. It's for literary merit." It shows the process that happened in the last 2 volumes of these little volumes by Wilson, of him grudgingly coming to admire President Kennedy, even though he didn't want to. Precious little in the way of literary stuff. By this point, Edwin Wilson was not reading. And old men of letters hate to admit that. They just hate to admit that they reach a point where they're just not reading anymore. They'll occasionally reread parts of their own books, but they won't read anything else. They either start to systematically lie about it and make huge claims about the stuff they read when they haven't really read it, or they will not just occasionally, but morosely, obsessively reread themselves. If, for instance, you're Kurt Vonnegut. Or they will just stop reading and stop mentioning it. So friends of theirs, longtime friends of theirs who are accustomed to getting a letter every week, will suddenly notice that books are not being mentioned at all, and they just tactfully don't bring it up. The only, if we want to stretch the definition of man of letters, the only man of letters that I know of from the heyday of the 20th century, whoever just came out and admitted it was Bill Buckley. It was William F. Buckley, who did admit it at the end of his life. Did admit, I don't really read anymore. I certainly don't write anymore. I don't have the concentration for it. Wilson never does. It just disappears from his writing. So I found that it was $1. The nice thing about the Brattle sale lot, the bad thing about the Brattle sale lot is that on a morning like this, you're going to freeze your giblets off. You're going to feel them crunching and crackling like they were made of crystal. They might fall on the lot, and you might have to bag them up and bring them home and thaw them out and reattach them. But the good part is you can indulge in any whim you want. The books are so cheap that you can indulge in any kind of a whim that you want. The next one that I found was this old Penguin paperback. I think I read this once upon a time. When did you come out? 1980. I think I read this. I think I got this at the old Penguin bookstore in Cambridge. And I think I remember thinking that it was kind of dumb. But I'm gonna give it another try. That has been 50 years. This is by Richard Collier, and this is 1940. The World in Flames. So we'll see. It was $1, so it was no big deal. I'm always up for it. The period is certainly interesting. Then these next 2, I have not seen in a long time used. I don't see them used very often. And they raise right away the age-old questions on BookTube of separating the author from the work. Even for $1, separating the author from the work. I've encountered that. I encounter that regularly at the Brattle out in the sale lot with the works of David Irving, a British historian whose works were originally met with hosannas of praise from the critics, including great World War II historians and great literary critics. And he studied World War II. He studied the Nazis. And gradually, he became an object lesson of something that I have been saying for years, which is that creatures like Hitler, have the ability to ensnare new followers long after they're dead. And their mesmerizing control doesn't let up. It just doesn't those people don't wake up. They don't snap out of it. That is absolutely true of Hitler. It's absolutely true of Nazism. It's true of Richard Nixon. The world will never be free of Nixon acolytes. There are a couple that are hanging on, still working to destroy the United States government. Still working on it. 60 years later. Still working to do that. That kind of fascination just has a stickiness to it. And that has always made it a little bit complicated for me to read David Irving. Right? That made it complicated for a lot of the critics who originally praised him to back off and start condemning him once it became obvious that he was no longer writing about Nazi Germany, he was defending Nazi Germany. Once that became obvious, once he, for instance, was taken to court and ruled by a London court to be a fraudulent historian, then he's, as far as I know, David Irving is still alive. I think his obituary would even come to my attention. And I think he's still working. I think he's still writing books that he, of course, has to self-publish. They can't show up in any bookstores. And that has always been complicated subject for me because Irving is a fantastic writer. It's just bad enough when he is enlisting fantastic prose ability in a bad cause. Far worse when you, the reader, who are not an expert on the German archives, start to think not only is he enlisting a lively prose style in a bad cause, but he might be fudging the books. He might be lying about the sources. That's what that London trial said. That London trial said it's not just that he's sympathetic to the Nazis, but scrupulous to the sources. It's that he's sympathetic to the Nazis and is shaping the sources accordingly. He is not trustworthy. That was the death knell. No normal reader of history is going to read his books the same way. They're certainly not going to read any later books after that judgment. And if that's a problem for me dealing with the literary legacy, I'm fascinated by David Irving. I'm fascinated by him. I wonder if there will be books about the whole phenomenon of David Irving. And I wonder if those books will do him the basic courtesy of reading what he wrote. God only knows. Who knows if that will ever happen? I doubt it. The only way that it would ever happen in the current censorious attitude of the publishing world would be if that censorious attitude and the current publishing world were wiped out by fascism, in which case David Irving's books would be reissued in deluxe collector's editions that would not only be praised by the Lickspittle Press, but you as an ordinary citizen would be compelled to buy them. Buy your Irving yet? Notice it's not in your basket here. So send a boy to go and get one? Maybe two? Oh, you don't want them? Oh, I see. And your name again? And your credit card number again? But if that's a problem with David Irving, who gradually became a Nazi sympathizer, imagine how much worse it is with an actual Nazi. Oh my God. It's so much worse. It's so much more complicated. Not to the Twitter crowd in 2023. The Twitter crowd in 2023, it's not complicated to them. They say, no, don't read it. Burn it. Burn it. Young people saying, burn books. Burn it. But I'm not talking to them. I'm talking to grown-ups. I'm talking, no matter what age you are, you could be 16. You're still a grown-up. If you're watching this channel, then you're already a grown-up and like being one, which means you're going to tackle these nuances. You're not just going to say, I'll burn it. And the fact is that one of the books that I got today was a bestseller in the West after the war. There was no Wikipedia at the time, but it wouldn't have taken much effort for the general population reader to learn who this author was. They made it a bestseller anyway, because it's really, really good reading. So I found 2 books on Operation Barbarossa, on 2 books on the Nazis striking east into Russia by Paul Carroll. There's Scorched Earth, and then the bestseller, Hitler Moves East. I found these 2. These are part 1 and part 2 of a gigantic history, and the author's name was not Paul Carroll. to put it mildly, the author's name was not Paul Carroll. His name was Schmidt. And when I say Nazi, I don't mean he occasionally went to, his girlfriend or his brothers dragged him to a rally in Nuremberg. I mean a genuine due-paying have dinner with Hitler Nazi, an actual card-carrying Nazi who went unprosecuted. He never actually faced justice. He actually was part of the machinery at Nuremberg, but he never actually faced any accountability himself. For people faced accountability, including the hangman's noose, for worse crimes, or for lesser crimes than what he did. That somehow never happened to him. He got out of the war, a witness for the prosecution, and eventually got into publishing and started writing histories. And it's easy to tell whose side he's on here, even though he changed his name. It's easy to tell because of his characterization of the Wehrmacht, of the Nazi war machine, which he views as pure Teutonic soldiers, wonderful, unsullied people whose only blot on their reputation comes from the fact that they were led by a dictator who was a lunatic. I haven't read these things in decades, and I wonder how noticeable it will be. There was a raging controversy at the time that they were coming out. At the time that they were really popular, there was a raging controversy. Experts then were saying, no, the Wehrmacht were all guilty. They knew what they were doing. The SS were not just ordinary soldiers. They were part of a liquidation campaign. The fact that that's never mentioned in these books is a lie by omission. That is not just the author deciding on what his emphasis will be. That's a lie. Versus people on the other side of the equation, including tons of people who reviewed these things and praised them, tons of critics, saying, well, he criticizes Hitler many times in these volumes as inept, as insane. He criticizes a whole bunch of Nazi military leaders if they make an inept or insane decision. The riposte from the historical critics would be to say that all of the Nazi military operation was an insane, treasonous, horrible, reprehensible thing to do. You can't pick and choose like that. And certainly you can't call the soldiers of the Wehrmacht innocent little civilians, innocent little lambs who were being led around by bad people. You can't do that. Not when they were perfectly aware of what was going on at labor camps and concentration camps and whatnot. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be very interesting. They were $1 a piece. It's going to be very interesting to go through them and see what I make of that whole question. See what I make of it. I don't know. We'll see. I doubt that I'll keep them. If I didn't keep them first time, so I doubt that I'll keep. I haven't kept any David Irving. I go at it. Hitler's War, especially. I try to grapple with it, figure out, okay, where are the cracks, where are the seams here? And I've had friends of mine, when we used to come over for wine and calzones on Friday nights, I've had friends say, look, there's curiosity and then there's curiosity. There is no reason for you to be examining this in fine detail. There's no reason for you to be doing this. There are 100,000 gigantic histories of campaigns in World War II. You could be studying them, and they don't have the taint of an author who was defending Hitler. I don't agree with that. No, I find the whole subject fascinating. And then the last paperback. This is something I did not know about. This is a UK paperback of The Fatal Englishman by Sebastian Fox. This is nonfiction. This is a series of 3 short biographies of English young men who were beautiful and punted on the Thames with Wilson, and then ended early, died abruptly in the first flower of their youth before they could get old. Much as all of us have hoped would happen to Wilson, but he just keeps trucking along. Who are the 3 people? They're not people I know really well. Christopher Wood, Richard Hillary, and Jeremy Wolfenden. I don't think I've ever read Sebastian Fox nonfiction. I saw this and thought, absolutely, I'll give this a try. So there you go. Those were the paperbacks. Then the hardcovers. I got a bunch of hardcovers. So first one I got is this thing. This is by Edward Stackpole of Stackpole Books. This is From Cedar Mountain to Antietam. This is his just a hardcover history of the American Civil War in its most resplendent period. This is the period when the horror was not yet completely battened down, and also when the inevitable conclusion of the thing was not yet battened down. This is when the South could boast Longstreet, Nathan Bedford Forrest, Jeb Stuart, Stonewall Jackson, Robert E. Lee, all in the full flower of not quite systematic defeat, thinking that maybe there's a chance. There was never any chance. But here's the height of when they could. That takes a serious mortal blow at Antietam. This is the second Civil War book that I've gotten to Brattle in the last month, 2 weeks, that culminates or is about Antietam, making me wonder if maybe Landscape Turned Red is going to be on my radar sometime soon. I've had copies of Landscape Turned Red is the best-selling single book on Antietam. And I've had it. I had it as a paperback, a mass market paperback. I had it as a trade paperback. I've had it as hardcover. I don't have a copy at the moment. But surely the fates are nudging me in that direction. Surely they are. I don't know. I found this here. General Stackpole is he's very good at following regiments and battalions across landscape and deploying them on battlefields in a way that will make you see them in your eye. That's very valuable. And a lot of times civilian writers of military history can't do that. I was glad to find this, but he wrote a couple of books that I wished I'd found instead. of this one. For instance, I don't have a copy of what I wouldn't give to find a big hardcover copy of They Met at Gettysburg, his incredible book on the Battle of Gettysburg. That would be wonderful. He also wrote a long book on the Battle of Chancellorsville that I wish I had. I looked, I didn't see it today, but it could be coming. I find it hard. This is not one of his major efforts. I find it hard to believe someone would have this and not have those others. But it's definitely going to be another Antietam treatment. So then this was not planned. Of course, you do not go to the Brattle with a plan in mind. You don't do that. You don't, especially the sale lot. You don't go to the sale lot with a plan in mind. But the other day I mentioned that I systematically do rereads of authors where I think I have a pretty good feel for what I feel about them, but it's not 100%, and it's a slow revolution of names on a carousel, and eventually I get to an author I want to revisit exhaustively. The letters, the biographies, the literary treatments, and the work. And I mentioned the other day that one of those would be William Wordsworth. The initial response to that mention was adorable. It was adorable in a kind of mildly irritating way. There's a whole bunch of people, a whole bunch of pretentosauruses came out of the woodwork to show up in my inbox and stroke their chins and lean back on their upholstered armchairs and their leather elbow patches and say, Wordsworth. Oh, good choice. He may be a little difficult, but I think you'll find him very rewarding. I had to issue a few, I hope, courteous emails saying just because I mentioned that I'm going to do a systematic revisitation of Wordsworth does not mean I don't know about him. I know a lot more about him than you do. A lot more. I've read and reviewed a huge amount about the guy. So kindly, if you could kindly doff your professor's cap, that would be great. I'm not saying that I need to revisit this author because I don't know anything about him. That was only the initial reaction, though. After that, there were a whole bunch of people who were kind of eager, kind of curious to know. A whole bunch of poetry nerds. I get the impression they didn't identify themselves as such, but honestly, would you? I got the impression that a whole bunch of poetry nerds were hoping that I would go at Wordsworth again, and maybe do it on camera. Of course, there's precious little time left for that. Certainly, I won't be beginning anything like this while I still have a channel. But I wondered if I made that mental decision. I wondered if the books at the Brattle sale lot would start to reflect that. If I would start to see Wordsworth books, either because they show up, or because they were there all along and I ignored them before I had this urge. I found one today. This is by John Warthen, and it's called The Gang. Oops, sorry. And this is Coleridge and Wordsworth, and also the Hutchinsons, specifically the Hutchinson girls that they were in love with. Huge, copious written record here, an enormous amount for the author to work with. This is Yale University Press, and this is from 2001. So this would have been before. What have we here? Coon's Corner Books thanks you for your order. We strive to fulfill orders accurately, however, occasionally a mistake may occur. Prior to leaving negative feedback, please provide us an opportunity to remedy any issue. We have a 99% positive feedback because we do care about our buyers. Coon's Corner Books, any of you know what that is, where that is? Well, anyway, I was not in the reviewing game when this came out. I think I probably read it. So it's a little bit about Wordsworth. Is it the first pebble in an avalanche? Am I going to start to get tons and tons of Wordsworthiana? That would be really interesting if that happened. Then this next one, also the Brattle just responding, the Brattle gods responding to something. I did an impromptu partial shelf tour the other day, and I mentioned Flexner's one-volume biography of George Washington, The Indispensable Man. There was an abridgment of his multi-volume biography of Washington, and I mentioned at the time in that video that I had one volume from that multi-volume and that I really should have them all. Flexner is really good to read. He's really enjoyable to read, whether it's about a guy I can't stand or not. And I found another one today out in the sale lot. This is Washington and the New Nation. So this would be right after. This is 1783 to 1793. So this will be the next volume in the series after the one that I do have. So now I have two. I think there are three more to go. They'll all turn up in the sale lot. Then this next one was also a biography. Big fat biography. I had a copy of this and got rid of it. I sent it out to one of you and just thought the Brattle will provide. I see this often. And the next time, this was like a year ago, The next time I was in the Brattle, I did see it, but I saw it in the shop. And I didn't. You have to do a sort of an instantaneous mental calculus when you see a book in the shop. Do I want that enough to pay? The shop prices are not expensive, but they're more than the sale lot. Do I want that enough to pay inside the shop prices for it? And also, have I ever seen that outside? Has that ever been a sale lot book? And if the answer to the second question is yes, I have seen that outside, I usually will forego it inside the shop and just wait for it to show up outside. And this is one of those. I love this. It's a great biography, but I could have waited for it to show up in the sale lot, and it did. I needed to dig. I should remember to do that. It was tucked in a corner on a low shelf. If I hadn't dug just a little, I might have missed it. And this is R.W.B. Lewis's biography of Edith Wharton. Oops, sorry. I will get the hang of that eventually. This is terrific. It's really, really erudite and waspishly quotable. It's very different in register and often different in emphasis from Hermione Lee's equally great big biography of Edith Wharton. So there's no problem at all in having both of them. I have the Hermione Lee. I also have Louis Auchincloss wrote a brief impressionistic little look at Edith Wharton. I have those as well. And I have one other Edith Wharton biography, but it's a trade paperback. It's ready to fall apart. So I think it's called A Gift of Words. And there are parts of it that I like. It's better on the literature than a lot of the other biographies are, but I can't use it anymore. Blocks of text are coming out of it. So, but now I have this, and the plastic covering and everything. That's fantastic. That might be very well worth a reread. Then another one, I mentioned that I sent out the Lewis Wharton biography to one of you. I also sent out a copy of this thing to one of you as well. I do every time. Every time I find a copy of this, I end up sending it away because I praise it, and one of you says it sounds interesting. And this is it's a great big novel by Jay Cantor. It's his masterpiece. I believe it's the greatest thing that he'll ever write if he's still alive, and it's Greatneck. It follows a big novel that with a little bit of sun fading here on the spine, just a tiny bit. You can still see it from across the room, so that's why I got it. If it had been worse, I wouldn't have. And it's the story of a group of people living on Greatneck and following them through a large chunk of their lives, both them, their normal lives, and also the mythologizing that we all do about our lives. And I don't know what it is about this book. I am not a huge fan of anything else this author wrote, but I love this book. I absolutely love it. The last time I had a copy, I sent it out to somebody, so I grabbed it again here. Again, when you're in the sale lot, you really don't have to worry about how much money you're racking up. There's a book that I love. It's this book. It's That Quail, Robert, by Margaret Stanger. And it's her story of adopting a little quail, a wild quail, that she takes into her life and learns to know. And the quail gets to know her as well. This is just delightful. It is an absolute classic in nature writing, but also in the subgenre of nature writing about humans taking wild animals into their homes. There's a huge subgenre like that, whether it's Born Free, where the wild animal is a 1,000-pound killing machine, or whether it's the huge number of books on people who take owls into their homes, or this, or Ring of Bright Water, or anything else. There's a huge subgenre of nature writing about people who bring wild animals into their home and learn about them. And it invariably turns out that the wild animals are people and are perfectly happy to get to know you. They're not monomaniacally obsessed with going out back into the wild in order to hunt and be hunted. They're perfectly happy to hang out on the couch and learn your weird ways if they're of such a mind. This is utterly delightful. It's an absolute classic. But I didn't know that this existed. This is by William Plummer, and it is called Five of a Kind, where this guy adopts 5 quails. He adopts 5 quails and just follows them throughout their life and describes it all. What's this? Do we have another picture? A picture of the group of them? Yeah, look at that. This is our author. And I have never read this. I've never even heard of it before. So I'm going to give it a plastic covering here so it doesn't, this is just a paper cover. And going right on the pile. This is going right on the pile for tonight. This is going to take no time at all to read. And it might be just as lovely as that Quail Robert. In a normal circumstance, this would be the find of the day for me. It's because in every Brattle trip, there's always a find of the day. In normal circumstances, that would be, but no. No, our last book is the find of the day. This is by M. Brock Fenton. It has a foreword by Merwin Tuttle. And it is bats. Just bats. It is a gigantic, oversized, heavily illustrated book about bats. Their various snout formations, their natural histories, their social behaviors, their biology, by one of the two great bat specialists of the 20th century. And Brock Fenton is one of those two, and Merwin Tuttle, who wrote the foreword to this, is the other. So this will be almost entirely, I'd be willing to bet this will be almost entirely Microchiroptera. It will be little bats that use echolocation. But what do I care? I saw this and immediately realized I do not have it. That I did not have this book. And now I do. Now I have this big, beautiful thing. This is definitely the find of the day. And I will be reading through this tonight. So there you go. That was a Brattle book haul. Trembling on the edge of some kind of storm. Don't know what the storm will be. It's coming this weekend. Some kind of storm. Last weekend, there was a storm, Sunday into Monday, that was slapping down pouring rain. I think it's likely, probably 70 or 80% likely, that this will be the same. The exact same thing on the exact same days, that it will be Sunday into Monday, slapping down pouring rain. I think that's extremely likely, but we shall see. Either way, I won't be going to the Brattle until next week. So I went and I indulged. It was no indulgence because I had rolled coins to pay for all of this. And even if that had spilled over, I have credit, a huge amount of credit, thanks to the generosity of all of you people. It's amazing. So we have M. Brock Fenton, a big picture book on bats. We have 5 of a kind. A man takes in not 1, but 5 quails. We have Great Neck by Jay Cantor. Contemporary fiction, but really done well. Really, really done well. We have Lewis's biography of Edith Wharton, which was the standard work until Hermione Lees came out. We have George Washington and the New Nation. Flexner's one of his volumes. I think the one after this is George Washington. I think Anguish and Farewell is the last volume after this. So there are 2 before the 2 that I have and 1 after, I'm pretty sure. We have The Gang, an intimate study of the words of Wordsworth in love. We have From Cedar Mountain to Antietam by General Stackpole. Those were the hardcovers. Then we have The Fatal Englishman, about Wilson's early death. We have 2 of Paul Carroll's World War II histories, the ones that he's famous for, the ones where the Wehrmacht is attacking Russia. We have 1940. The world was in flames. And finally, Upstate by Edmund Wilson. One of the oddest and most idiosyncratic of his odd and idiosyncratic little shelf of autobiographical volumes. There are plenty of things here that I will be picking and pecking at tonight, and 1 or 2 that I'll be reading from front to back. So, well worth it in terms of a trip. Of course, in the back of my mind, when I go to the Brattle now, I'm thinking about keepers. How many things are keepers? The Lewis Wharton biography is a classic. It is beautifully written. That might be a keeper. Might very well be. And the M. Brock Fenton Bath book will not only be a keeper, it will come in here. So who knows? Who knows? There'll be a lot of reading, that plus any fugitive new releases that I still have to do. But in the next week or so, my reading is going to shift almost entirely over to older books and rereading. So a lot of these might get a lot more attention than I think they do. But anyway, that's the Brattle for today. I'll wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.